Joining me now for 100 Huntley Street on the road in Alberta is Olympic bobsled athlete Melissa Lotholz. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so thrilled you're joining us today. You have such a remarkable story as a Canadian athlete, but also spiritually, and we know there's lots for you to share today. For some of our viewers who love the Olympics, can you remind them of some of the times you've competed, as well as with your World Cup winnings, some of the medals that you have?
Yeah, so I joined the team in 2014, so it's been a decade now that I've been in the bobsled space, and competed as a brakeman in 2014 up until the 2018 games, where I competed for Canada in my first games. I finished 7th with Christine de Bruin, who also was from the Edmonton area. I grew up on a farm northwest of the city there, and after that transitioned into the front seat and returned to the 2022 games as a pilot, became the first Canadian woman to ever do that feat, where you're actually competing in the back seat in one games and then the front seat in another. And now I'm training towards 2026.
And am I correct that you have 18 World Cup medals?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah, so I am the most successful female brakeman that we've had.
Yeah.
Worked with Kaylee Humphreys, 2-time Olympic champion. I had 17 World Cup medals as a brakeman, 2 World Championship silvers, and then 4 Crystal Globes with Kaylee, which is the overall trophy for the World Cup. And then I also got a World Cup medal as a pilot in the new discipline of women's monobob. So it was the first ever Canadian to medal in that discipline as well.
That's incredible. And Melissa, you did have a dream of being an Olympian when you were younger and competing at such a large scale, but you weren't sure it would be realized. And I want to take us back to your time growing up on the family farm. What kind of family life did you have, and what was that like for you when you were younger?
I have a younger sister, and we would spend hours on the farm, maybe working and learning physical literacy through that, but also playing. And one of the things we would do is we would set up an obstacle course, and we actually would time ourselves through the obstacle course, and then we would do it again to see if we could improve on our time. And it's things like that where just there was this natural, curiosity and competitiveness. And yeah, the farm was a great place to not only learn some physical skills, and learn how to play and compete and all these foundations for sport, but also just some of those life skills around hard work, watching my parents and my grandparents work on the farm. It's a farm that my great-grandpa homesteaded way, way back. It's almost been in the family now 100 years. And so just that legacy of what does it mean to work hard, to work towards a goal, to, work in and out of season, and to also trust God, because you can't control the weather. And so it wasn't probably until I was in this space of sport, where sport can be very volatile. You can win one week and lose the next kind of thing. And you're working towards this big goal, but you don't have a lot of control in the bumps and obstacles along the way, that I really remember sitting down and talking with my dad and being I didn't get it growing up, how stressful it is watching a big cloud roll in, and you're okay, is what I'm investing in gonna be wiped out, or Lord, will you sustain me in this season? So yeah, growing up on the farm, I think it laid so many great foundations for sport, from the actual ability to move my body and understand my body, and to the discipline required for sport and the perseverance required for sport as well.
That's something you've needed throughout your career as an athlete in Canada. And even your willingness to take the big leap and say, okay, I'm going to try bobsledding. That started at the University of Alberta, when you were actually attending that university to compete in track. And you got this opportunity to compete in bobsled.
Yeah, and so rewind even to what you were saying before, that dream to be an Olympian. I don't know where it started, but I know by the time I was in grade 8, I had we went to a youth retreat. I got a journal handed to me, and we were encouraged, okay, write a prayer to God. And I wrote I think 2-3 pages in, I was Lord, may this silly dream of going to the Olympics come true, and would you use it for your glory? And I knew by grade 8 that I'm this is unrealistic. It probably statistically should not happen, especially to someone like me. Who am I? I'm not in an Olympic level sport. I knew by that point in time, I was fast at track, but I wasn't likely going to make it to the Olympics kind of thing. And it wasn't in club sports. And so my grade 12 year actually was kind of my first yes. I thought I was going to be done competitive sports after grade 12. Went to track meet at the end of the year, which is the last school sport of the school year. And after the 4x100 meter relay, where my team won gold, I had a coach from the University of Alberta come up to me and was like, hey, you're fast. Have you thought about running at a post-secondary level? And I was kind of like, whoa, like, I can do that. And I was like, okay, yes, like, yeah, I'll work at that. And so that year I ended up like joining the club, and I had said to him, like, I am planning on going to the U of A at some point, but I'm actually signed up to go to Vanguard Bible College in Edmonton. So I ran club for a year, went to Bible college, and then transferred to the U of A. And it was during that first year at the U of A, my teammate, Christine de Bruin, who I went to my first games with and competed with, we were training partners in track, and she was transitioning out of track and field, and our coach was like, hey, you should come do bobsled. Because he knew our strength and conditioning coach down here at the Canadian Bobsled team. And so I got to watch her do it, and then that kind of turned into an opportunity, an open door for me to say yes.
Well, it's amazing that you did say yes, because you were quite quickly at a World Cup. You did very well. And then before you knew it, you were at the 2018 Olympics.
Yes.
And going into that Olympics, you had a theme, greater than gold.
Yeah.
What happened at the 2018 Olympics?
There were some hip problems that I was having.
Okay.
So I ended up sidelined in the second half of the season for 3 out of 4 races. And yeah, I went from this position of being like, I can win the Olympics, like I'm working towards being an Olympic champion, to being like, I don't know if I'm even going to go if my body doesn't smarten up and figure itself out in the next 50 days. And then the coaches kept on saying that I would have this opportunity still to kind of prove and fight for that top sled position. And we got to the games, and the day before the opening ceremonies, I got sat down in a meeting and was told, like, hey, Mel, like, we think that, yeah, you do have the capacity to win an Olympics, but it's not going to be these ones. Like, you're going to not be in the top sled. You're going to go with our developing pilot, Christine, in the 3rd ranked sled for Canada. And so it went from, like, I could win the Olympics, and this is the goal, to being like, okay, like, I hope we come top 10. And so it was a roller coaster, because you're holding this tension of, like, I've achieved this childhood dream that I prayed when I was, like, super young, like, Lord, could I go to the Olympics, and could you use it for your glory? So yeah, it was hard for sure.
And out of that disappointment, you ended up calling somebody that's special in your life, an athletes in action mentor.
Yeah.
And you poured your heart out to them and told the truth to them about how you're feeling and about how God is possibly letting you down, and lots of different feelings you were probably having. What was that phone call like?
Yeah. So yeah, I was in a stairwell in South Korea at the warm-up for my first race at the Olympics, because we raced over 2 days. And I called that mentor in the stairwell, and I was like, hey, like, this isn't going to probably turn out the way I hoped, but I still have a choice here to honor God and to invite him into this space. And so we prayed together on the phone, and it was like, okay, God, like, I want you in this. I want to, honor you with what I'm doing. I want to invite you into this and, like, submit myself to him. But there was a lot still after that games that I had to work through, and it was like, right, like, why does a good God let bad things happen to good people? Or, like, that question of pain that we all have to wrestle with at some point. It was, I think, that year or even the year before, the Lord, I love how he just speaks your language, right? He talks to all of his children differently. And for me, he brought up this picture. And it was related to a book, my favorite book that I was reading at the time, Hind's Feet on High Places by Hannah Hennard, which is just this allegory of much afraid, learning to trust the shepherd, which was God, and taking her to these high places. And in that book, there's this time when she's in the desert, and she gets to see this crucible of how gold is refined. And of course, Isaiah talks about this, and it comes up in scriptures a bunch of different times, in Corinthians as well, right? And it talks about how gold's purified by heating everything up, straining off the impurities, letting it harden, and then doing it again, and again, and again. And just the Lord was talking to me about how, like, going into those games, that idea of, like, I'm going for gold, but there's something so much greater than gold here. Like, I'm becoming gold. I'm being refined in this process. And, like, what do you do with a gold medal? It's not something that you just, like, tuck in your back pocket or hide away. But it's something that, like, he's like, no, I get to wear you around my neck and, like, proudly be like, this is my girl. This is my masterpiece. And it was just that picture of really how he just uses the perseverance through trials to develop character in us and develop faith in us. And sometimes it's harder than we think.
It is. It reminds me of the book of Philippians, because Paul writes it from prison, and he's suffering greatly, but they call it the joy book because he's always, finding his joy even though he's suffering.
Totally.
And, to hear your resilience as you moved out of that experience, and to hear how God met you and shifted your thinking, and refined you. It's so encouraging, and I know it inspires a lot of viewers going through all different kinds of hardships in life. And you needed that refining because actually another challenge was coming. The 2022 Olympics, you anteed up, you worked hard again, and there was something that was not exactly as you thought it would be.
And going into those games, there was again that tension that I ended up feeling. They added a second women's discipline of monobob, and I had some success in it, like early on. Like I said before, I won the first ever medal for Canada in that new discipline, which was exciting. But our team, we were really, really dominant going into the Olympics that year, especially in the monobob race. And the way international quotas worked out, you could only ever send 2 sleds. So I was ranked 8th in the world going into the Olympics in monobob, but my teammates were ranked 3rd and 4th. And so again, I was at the Olympics with this tension where it's like, awesome, I've achieved this goal where my goal was to return to the games. I've become the first Canadian woman to ever compete at the Olympics as both a brakeman and a pilot. Like, that's worth celebrating. But at the same time, there's like this bitterness where you're like, oh, I'm like the highest ranked person in the world that doesn't get to compete in this other discipline of monobob, where actually I was stronger in monobob than 2 women, but we had more quota spots in the 2-woman race. Having, I guess, been through that experience in 2018, it was kind of like, you're a little quicker to be able to be like, okay, no, like, this is who the Lord is. And I will, like, that's going to be the song that I sing. That's going to be the banner that I raise, even if I don't feel it.
Yeah, he's faithful even when we are suffering, and his plans are greater than ours. We don't always understand them, and it doesn't make the suffering easier.
No.
Yeah. And, you know, you considered after the 2022 Olympics quitting, you wondered about that moment, you know, do I keep going? And that's understandable because of what you've gone through, how challenging it's been. You've worked so hard, and yet every time, you know, you're about to be able to almost compete, to really show your skill, it doesn't happen. And yet you've chosen to ante up again. And you are aiming to qualify for the 2026 Olympics in Italy. Tell us about your hopes and dreams for that Olympics.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think too, right? Like, as much as obviously you're a high performance athlete, the Olympics is naturally that end goal. It's naturally that thing that you're working towards, but it can't always be your why. Gearing up towards the Olympics, it's like, my goal is again to be able to go back to compete in both disciplines, to do as good as I possibly can, ideally like bringing home a medal for Canada. But I also understand that that's very well might not happen. And so what do you do with that tension? And I think in this season, I'm really asking the Lord, like, okay, like, what does success look like in this space? Is it just showing up and persevering and being a steward of what you've given me? And
Well, that's a good question. Like, what makes a true champion from a biblical perspective? What would you say?
Yeah, I think faithfulness. Like, I love that story, that parable where he's like, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. Here's some more. Come enjoy your master's happiness. And you're like, if at the end of this all, I can just hear, well done, good and faithful servant, I think that's what makes it successful.
I think that's what you will hear, Melissa. I think that's what we're all thinking right now as we listen to you. And Melissa, for that person watching right now who is in a state of feeling hopeless, maybe their dreams have been broken, and maybe they're not Olympic dreams, but their family dreams or their career dreams or their health dreams. What would you say to that person right now to encourage them?
Bring it to God. Like, you look at the Psalms, there's so many laments, right? Or you look at, like, one of the things I was thinking about recently is how, like, that shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. And it's like, he knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but like, he entered into Mary and Martha's suffering. And so it's like, he's with us in that space. And like, he's mourning with us, but there's also more to come. And I think the beauty of it all that I've seen again and again and again, even through my sports story, is that like, God is a redeeming God. And if there's anything in his character that we can stand on, it's like, God is love and God is a redeemer, right? It's like the whole gospel is like, he sent his son so that we could have relationship with him, like to redeem us as people. And it looks different sometimes than we think, but it's like the Lord is a redeeming God, and you can stand so firm on that. And he's going to redeem our suffering.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, Melissa. That's such a good word for so many Canadians watching right now. And let me tell you something else. So many Canadians watching right now are going to be praying for you and cheering you on as you work towards qualifying for this next Olympics. And we are some of your biggest fans. Thank you for being with us today, Melissa.
Thank you very much.